The photo reached my phone on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing expense reports from home. One quiet notification, one accidental message, one careless mistake that shattered the life I thought I had built. My name is Lauren Bennett. I am 39 years old, and for nearly a decade I believed my marriage had survived every challenge life could throw at it. I was wrong. The message was supposed to go to someone else. I knew that the second I saw my cousin Megan's name above the photo. Before I could even wonder why she was sending me anything in the middle of the day, I opened it. There he was. My husband Ethan, standing in a bright hospital room with the biggest smile I had seen in years. In his arms were two newborn babies wrapped in matching white blankets. Beneath the picture were only 5 simple words. Daddy loves his little miracles. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone. I did not burst into tears. Instead, I felt something much stranger. Silence. The kind that settles deep inside your chest when your heart finally understands something your mind has refused to believe. For 8 years, Ethan and I had fought to become parents. Every holiday someone asked when we would finally have children. Every family gathering came with another well-meaning suggestion. Every failed pregnancy left another invisible scar that only I seemed to carry. We spent thousands of dollars on specialists, hormone treatments, medical procedures. Hope followed by heartbreak. Again and again. Every time another treatment failed, Ethan would squeeze my hand and tell me none of it was my fault. He said we would keep fighting together. I believed him because loving someone means believing the promises they repeat when everything else is falling apart. Looking back now, I realize how desperately I wanted those promises to be true. As a senior financial auditor, I spend my days uncovering hidden transactions, manipulated records, and carefully disguised fraud. Numbers rarely lie. People do. Yet somehow I had never imagined needing those same skills inside my own marriage. I enlarged the photo. Ethan's wedding ring was still on his finger. The babies looked only a few days old. Nothing about the image looked staged. Nothing about his smile looked uncertain. He looked exactly like a proud father introducing his children to the world. A few seconds later, my phone rang. Megan. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then another message appeared. Lauren, I never wanted you to find out like this. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and opened my laptop instead. Because after 15 years of investigating financial deception, I knew one truth better than anything else. You never confront someone after discovering the first lie. You quietly uncover every single one before they ever realize you have started looking. The next morning, I woke before sunrise without setting an alarm. For the first time in years, I made coffee for only myself. Ethan had texted sometime after midnight, saying a supplier meeting in Phoenix would keep him away for another 3 days. I read the message twice, then placed my phone beside my laptop. If he believed I knew nothing, he would keep making mistakes. Confident people always do. I started with our joint household account. Ethan and I had mostly kept separate finances throughout our marriage. At the time, it had seemed practical. Now it felt like the smartest decision I had ever made without realizing it. Buried among mortgage payments, grocery purchases, and utility bills, for hotel charges caught my attention. The same hotel, the same suburb outside Denver. 2 nights each visit. Always Thursday through Friday. I opened my calendar and compared the dates. 3 of those weekends matched my recovery after fertility procedures. Ethan had kissed my forehead before leaving for what he called emergency business meetings. While I lay at home exhausted, blaming my body for another failed attempt at motherhood, he had apparently been somewhere else entirely. I kept digging. Location history confirmed his phone had traveled to that same suburb every single time. Then I searched an old cloud storage account we had shared years earlier for vacation pictures. Ethan had forgotten it still synchronized automatically. The photographs began nearly 3 years ago. An office holiday party. A weekend cabin near a lake. Dinner reservations disguised as client entertainment. In every picture, Megan stood just a little too close. The distance between them grew smaller with every passing month until there was no distance left at all. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Finding proof of betrayal hurts. Finding years of proof changes something deeper. The pain slowly transforms into clarity. I stopped wondering whether they had betrayed me. Now I only wanted to know how long they believed they had gotten away with it. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with one of Denver's highest-rated divorce attorneys. His name was Michael Carter. The appointment took less than 15 minutes to arrange. I told no one. Not Ethan. Not Megan. That evening, when Ethan called to say goodnight, I answered with the same calm voice I had always used. I asked about his meeting. He asked about my day. We spoke like two ordinary spouses. Only one of us knew our marriage had already ended. 3 days later, just as I finished organizing every receipt, photograph, and timeline into a single folder, my phone rang again. This time the caller was someone I never expected. Ethan's mother. The moment I answered, she whispered only one sentence. Please don't tell Ethan yet that I met Patricia Walker 2 days later at a quiet neighborhood cafe halfway between our homes. We had shared coffee there dozens of times over the years, usually laughing about family stories or talking about work. That morning, neither of us smiled. She was already waiting when I arrived. Her untouched coffee had gone cold. She looked older than I remembered. Not because of time. Because of guilt. As I sat down, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand with trembling fingers. I have wanted to tell you something for 8 years, she whispered. Every single day, I told myself tomorrow would be the day. I stayed silent. Years of interviewing clients had taught me something valuable. People reveal far more when they are not interrupted. Patricia took a long breath before continuing. It began during your fertility treatments. The words instantly tightened something inside my chest. She explained. That one afternoon, years earlier, a medical envelope had been delivered to her house by mistake. Ethan had temporarily listed her address while handling insurance paperwork, so the clinic accidentally mailed an important report there. She opened it without thinking. She believed it was another routine update. It was not. Her eyes filled with tears. I should have handed it to him immediately. Instead, she called the fertility specialist. She admitted she had panicked. She feared the report would destroy Ethan emotionally. She begged the doctor to give her time to figure out how to tell him. That time became weeks. The weeks became months. Eventually, the secret became impossible to confess. I convinced myself I was protecting my son, she said quietly. But every year that passed made the truth heavier. I listened without speaking. Somewhere beneath my anger, another question had begun forming. What exactly was in that report? Patricia slowly shook her head. I can't explain it the way it deserves to be explained. She opened her purse and removed a small folded piece of paper. It was not the medical report. It was a note she had written to herself the day she read it. Terrified, she might someday forget the exact wording. She stared at it for several seconds before folding it closed again. The original records are still with Dr. Jennifer Harris. She looked directly into my eyes. You need to hear it from her. A strange realization settled over me. The affair had devastated my marriage. But Patricia's fear told me something even larger had been buried underneath it. One hidden decision. One unopened conversation. One secret that had quietly shaped 8 years of our lives. When we stood to leave, Patricia spoke one final sentence. I promise you this, Lauren. When you read that report, you will never look at your marriage the same way again. Dr. Jennifer Harris recognized me the moment I walked into her office. 8 years had changed both of us. There were more gray strands in her hair. There were more lines around my eyes. But the sadness that lived inside fertility clinics never seemed to age. She greeted me warmly before leading me into her office instead of an examination room. A thick medical folder rested neatly on her desk. She looked at it for a long moment before speaking. Lauren, before we begin, I owe you an apology. I frowned. She lowered her eyes. Years ago, I allowed someone else's fear to interfere with your right to know the truth. There was no anger in her voice, only regret. She slid the folder toward me. I should never have agreed to keep this from either of you. I opened it carefully. Most of the pages were familiar. Blood tests, hormone levels, treatment schedules, ultrasound reports. They brought back memories I had spent years trying to bury. Then I reached the final section. A laboratory report addressed directly to Ethan Bennett. I read every word. Then I read it again. The room became perfectly still. My hands never shook. My heart did. For 8 years, I had believed my body had failed our marriage. The report proved something completely different. Every major fertility concern had belonged to Ethan, not me. The specialists had documented it clearly. The recommendation was simple. The doctor wanted both of us to discuss alternative options together before continuing treatment. That conversation had never happened. Instead, I had endured countless injections, procedures, endless appointments. Every failed pregnancy had become another reason for me to apologize to my husband. I remembered lying awake at night, whispering that I was sorry. Sorry my body had disappointed him. Sorry I could not give him the family he deserved. None of those apologies had ever belonged to me. A heavy silence filled the office. Dr. Harris quietly handed me a box of tissues. I smiled sadly and pushed it back. I don't think I'm crying anymore, I said. For the first time in years, I wasn't grieving. I was finally understanding. Then another thought crashed into my mind with terrifying force. I slowly looked up from the report. If Ethan's diagnosis never changed, Dr. Harris nodded before I could finish. She already understood the question. The probability would still be extremely low. I stared at the page. Then I pictured the photograph. Ethan smiling, holding Megan's newborn twins, calling himself their father. Every piece of evidence I had collected suddenly rearranged itself into an entirely different puzzle. The affair had been real. The betrayal had been real. But one question remained. If Ethan was never supposed to be able to father those babies, then whose children had he been holding in that hospital room? I left Dr. Harris's office carrying 2 things. A folder filled with medical records, and the truth I had spent 8 years searching for. I did not call Ethan. I did not call Megan. There was nothing either of them could say that would change what I now knew. Instead, I drove home and placed the folder inside my desk drawer beside the evidence I had already collected. For the first time since receiving that photograph, I stopped feeling confused. The facts were finally beginning to align. 3 days later, Patricia called again. Her voice sounded steadier than before. I can't keep hiding anymore, she said. He is bringing the twins to my house tonight. I understood immediately. She had made her decision. That evening I stayed home. Everything that happened next was told to me later by Patricia herself. Ethan arrived carrying one baby while Megan followed behind with the other. According to Patricia, they both looked exhausted but happy. Ethan could barely stop smiling. Mom, he said proudly, you finally get to meet your grandchildren. Patricia looked at the babies. Then she looked at her son. 8 years of silence collapsed inside one impossible moment. She later told me that her knees nearly gave out beneath her. She had imagined this conversation hundreds of times. None of those imaginary versions prepared her for reality. She whispered only one word. Wait. Ethan frowned. What is it? Patricia asked both of them to sit down. Without another explanation, she disappeared into the hallway and returned carrying a sealed envelope. The same envelope she had hidden inside a fireproof safe for nearly 8 years. She placed it gently on the coffee table. This belongs to you, she said. Ethan looked confused. He opened the envelope. Inside were the original laboratory report, Dr. Harris's recommendation, and Patricia's handwritten note explaining why she had hidden everything. The room became completely silent. Ethan read every page. Then he started reading them again. His face slowly lost all color. This report, his voice barely worked. It's about me. Patricia nodded through tears. It always was. He looked up at his mother with disbelief. You knew all these years? She closed her eyes. I thought I was protecting you.
No, Ethan whispered.
You were protecting me from the truth. He sat perfectly still for several seconds before speaking again. Lauren blamed herself. I watched her apologize to me. I watched her suffer. His voice cracked. And I never knew. Across the room, Megan had gone completely pale. She was staring at the report with growing confusion. Then she quietly asked the question no one else wanted to say aloud. If Ethan has had this condition all these years. She looked down at the twins sleeping peacefully in their carriers. Then whose babies are these? According to Patricia, nobody answered. Because in that terrifying moment, every lie inside that room had just collided with an even bigger one. It was nearly 10 that night when someone knocked on my front door. I already knew who it was. The security camera had shown Ethan's car pulling into the driveway several minutes earlier. I took a slow breath before opening the door. He looked nothing like the confident man in the hospital photograph. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were swollen. The neatly folded medical report was crushed tightly in one hand. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered my name. Lauren. I stepped aside without saying a word. We sat across from each other in the same living room where we had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and countless quiet evenings over the past 8 years. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument we had ever shared. I know about the report, he said. I know my mother hid it. I nodded. I found out a few days ago. His shoulders dropped. So you already knew? Yes. He covered his face with both hands. I swear to you, Lauren, I never saw those results. I never knew you weren't the one. Struggling. I would never have let you carry that guilt if I had known. I believed him. Not because I still trusted him. Because his shock could not be faked. For the first time since our marriage began, I could see a man confronting a truth that had been stolen from him. But another truth still remained. I believe you, I said quietly. He looked up, surprised. You do? Yes. A tear rolled down his cheek. Then please don't end this. If my mother had told me 8 years ago, I gently interrupted him. Your mother's decision explains the past. It does not excuse yours. He stared at me without speaking. You chose to betray our marriage. You chose to build another relationship instead of talking to me. You chose to let me believe I was broken while you searched for comfort somewhere else. His eyes filled with regret. I thought I had given up on us.
No, y answerat sufli.
You gave up on honesty. The room became quiet again. After several moments, he finally asked the question I knew was coming. Is there anything I can do to fix this? I looked around the room. Every photograph on the shelves. Every piece of furniture. Every memory we had built together. Then I looked back at him. There are some things people survive. And there are some things they simply learn from. I forgive you, Ethan. His expression changed. For one brief second, hope returned to his face. Then I finished my sentence. But forgiveness isn't the same as another chance. The hope disappeared. He lowered his head and nodded slowly. For the first time since the photo appeared on my phone, neither of us argued. Neither of us defended the past. We simply accepted that some endings arrive long before the paperwork does. When Ethan finally stood to leave, I walked him to the front door. As his car disappeared into the darkness, I realized something extraordinary. For the first time in years, I no longer felt trapped inside someone else's lie. 3 weeks later, the divorce hearing lasted less than an hour. I had imagined that day countless times. I expected anger. I expected resentment. Instead, I felt something surprisingly peaceful. Michael Carter stood beside me, reviewing the final paperwork one last time before we entered the courtroom. Every financial document had already been verified. Every asset had been divided fairly. I had never wanted revenge through money. The truth had already delivered consequences no settlement ever could. When Ethan walked into the room, he looked older than he had only a month earlier. Not because time had passed, because regret had. He quietly took the seat across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just before the proceedings began, he looked toward me. I know I don't deserve to ask, he said, but is there any future where we start over? I held his gaze. Months earlier, that question would have shattered me. Now it simply made me sad. There isn't. He nodded slowly. Not because he agreed. Because he already knew the answer before asking. The judge finalized everything quickly. A few signatures. A few formal statements. Then 8 years of marriage officially became part of my past. Outside the courthouse, the morning air felt lighter than I remembered. For years, I had carried guilt that never belonged to me. Now I was finally walking without it. Life moved forward quietly after that. I heard through mutual friends that Megan had left Colorado with the twins. No one seemed to know where she had gone. Ethan sold his share of the logistics company several months later and moved across the country to begin again. Patricia continued calling me every few weeks. She never asked for forgiveness. She simply hoped that one day I might remember her for the woman she tried to become instead of the mistake she spent 8 years hiding. I appreciated her honesty. Healing does not erase the past. It simply allows people to stop living inside it. About a year later, I used part of my divorce settlement to establish a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping couples facing infertility. Every patient deserved complete access to their medical information. Every husband and wife deserved transparency. No family should ever lose years because someone believed love required hiding the truth. People often ask whether I regret everything that happened. The answer surprises them. I regret the pain. I regret the lost years. But I do not regret the woman those years eventually shaped. I learned that trust is precious. Honesty is not optional. And self-worth should never depend on someone else's choices. If there is one lesson my story has taught me, it is this. The greatest revenge is rarely watching someone else's life fall apart. The greatest revenge is rebuilding your own until their lies no longer have the power to define who you are. If my story meant something to you, I would love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in my place? Leave your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoy honest stories about resilience, betrayal, and second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more stories every week.